This week, Twitter has announced that it will ban the term groomer. New reporting suggests that Twitter, which was influenced by recent calls from left-wing groups, will ban the use of the word groomer as a criticism when in context of discussion of gender identity. They said, "We are committed to combating abuse motivated by hatred, prejudice, or intolerance, particularly abuse that seeks to silence the voices of those who have been historically marginalized," Twitter staffer Lauren Alexander told the Daily Dot. "For this reason, we prohibit behavior that targets individuals or groups with abuse based on their perceived membership in a protected category. Use of this term is prohibited under our hateful conduct policy when it is used as a descriptor in context of discussion of gender identity," Alexander said. So let's set the stage here for people who aren't as on Twitter as we are. This kicked off, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, I believe this really kicked off with the Disney Don't Say Gay bill, right? Where they started talking about how teachers were representing themselves in the classroom, bringing up issues specifically around gender and pronouns in the classroom. Florida passed a bill that was a very badly written bill trying to give a lot more authority to clamp down on that to local districts. And there was a huge backlash from the left. What I then saw go down on Twitter was people started saying that people who thought teachers should be able to talk about these things in the classroom, people who supported this kind of instruction and education in the classroom were quote groomers who were essentially attempting to lay the pathway for kids to have gender dysphoria and other issues around their sexuality. Or
to molest or abuse them is the traditional implication of the word groomer. It's like preparing somebody for your abuse. And it's actually got a long context before this. And it's kind of, the term has kind of been brought into the political conversation, not just by the Don't Say Gay legislation, or so-called, in Disney, down in Florida and Disney and stuff, but it's kind of, there's this account Libs of TikTok that essentially finds viral, not even viral, it finds videos and makes them viral of left-wing teachers, academics, influencers, whatever, typically saying very outlandish things about gender, about their pronouns, about sexuality. And a lot of the videos will include like teachers who talk about pronouns or sexuality and how they discuss them with their kids in their classroom, or just how like sometimes some of the most extreme examples will have them talking about how like all kids are sexual beings, or other crazy statements that a few of these people make. And then these videos go viral, and it's kind of associated, this okay groomer, it's like a viral retort to these kind of left-wing activists pushing more extreme messages on gender and sexuality, and in some cases, you know, really involving children in it, which weirds a lot of people out, I think for understandable reasons. I personally think that the term has been overused, and that you shouldn't throw a term around lightly that implies preying on children, right? Which is one of the worst things you can do or accuse someone of. Now, in some cases, they really are grooming, right? They're doing very gross things in front of children, right? Like, or talking to children about very sexually explicit material, showing them not even borderline, but pornographic, woke children's books or other things. But in many of these other cases, it doesn't go that far, yet these words are still being thrown around. Basically, like anybody who opposes the Don't Say Gay bill, okay, groomer. And so it's become not the greatest term. I don't like how it's been overused, because I think actual grooming is like literally borderline criminal behavior. It's predatory, it's terrible. But it's kind of like when the left called everything racist, and then the term racist lost its power to call out truly bad behavior and thoughts. I think the same thing's happening now. But Twitter's decision to ban the term when used in this context is totally nonsensical and absurd. Because, I mean, so we just published a piece on this that we'll link to by Eliza Blue on Base Politics. But Twitter is language policing in a way that, as Eliza points out, will get a lot of survivors who speak out about abuse and what happened to them flagged in algorithms and potentially suspended. And also, like, Twitter is actually used to engage in grooming and criminal activity in many cases. We're not going to get into the specific details of these cases because they're very disturbing. But in this article that we'll link to, Eliza goes through multiple high-profile cases where child sexual abuse material and children themselves were groomed and abused on Twitter. And in some of the cases, Twitter didn't take it down until the government forced them to, or until they got sued. So Eliza's whole point is that it's warped priorities to be language policing at the demand of woke leftist groups when you're not even cracking down on actual criminal behavior. And I think that's a very fair criticism to make. It's kind of summed up with this funny tweet I saw from Blair White, who said, "So, we're not allowed to call anyone groomers on this app, but pedophiles are allowed to call themselves MAPs, minor attracted people. Just burn it all down at this point," she said. And the point is fair. There's actually accounts on Twitter allowed to be on there, out there pushing for basically pedophilia acceptance, a minor attracted people movement. There's even some people who want to freaking add it to the LGBTP, which I say, hell no, straight to the wood chipper for you, or to a jail cell. But those people are allowed to speak on Twitter, and their terms aren't banned. But groomer and okay groomer are going to be banned. It's just, to me, Twitter can do whatever it wants. I do believe that, but I just think it's freaking stupid and counterproductive.
Well, that's the main thing that makes me mad about it, is it actually is extremely counterproductive. And for people who want to focus on stopping the actual abuse and trafficking of children, this is the exact opposite direction of where you should go. Because I do think there's some conservatives who started using the term groomer far too broadly, and it was losing its meaning because of that. I thought it was pretty foolish of them, and it just wasn't a good look as a whole. I don't think that necessarily talking to kids about having a husband if you're gay, or like even saying like, these are my pronouns, I don't have a huge issue with that. It's when you start trying, I've said this to people on the left for a long time, it's when you start trying to push those issues on children before they bring them up themselves, right? Like, why are you going to introduce issues with a child's gender and their sexuality before that child has even started thinking about those things? That kind of activity, I would say, I don't think I'd call it grooming, because I think, to me, grooming is specifically trying to prepare a child to be sexually exploited or abused. That is traditionally how we have legally used that term, and it would apply to people like Ghislaine Maxwell, who were roping kids in. It would apply to many of the predators Eliza calls out in her piece that were actively trying to seduce younger kids, make them think they're talking to people they're not, get illicit material from them, and then actually try to like harass and bully them and say, if you don't send me more, I'm going to release this, I'm going to tell your parents. That's all grooming, right? And we need to be really intentional with our terms. But there can still be abusive behavior, I think, in some of these conversations.
Inappropriate.
Creepy. Yes, especially by school teachers who have no business helping kids wade through sexual issues, right? This is for the families to handle, and that's just not your place at all. And I do think things like the Libs of TikTok account have highlighted that this is a problem. This is something that is happening in our schools. Is it a fringe number of people? Yes, but it is an issue, and I understand why people are disgusted by it and have an issue. So all in all, to say, that's kind of a nuanced conversation on this side. But when you start actually trying to ban groomer and say that people can't use it at all because some people are overusing it, ultimately, that hurts survivors, that hurts the ability for people to communicate within legal channels about actual crimes being carried out, and it wastes a tremendous amount of resources going after trying to police the use of the term groomer versus actually policing child pedophiles on these freaking platforms. So it's so annoying to me, and this is a major beef I have throughout almost all politics, but specifically criminal justice issues, is like, when you spread our resources too thin, what you ultimately do is get people caught up in the system for things that should not be illegal, should not be banned, and that are not actually harmful to people, while the actual predators, while the actual violent perpetrators often get off because the resources are being spread too thin instead of being concentrated on the people who are actually threats and harmed. So this is what Twitter's doing. I think it's a very foolish policy. It's obviously very politically motivated because this is definitely a right on left kind of ordeal going on. So definitely check out Eliza's work, guys. We interviewed her on the show too if you want to look more into her work. She's an excellent trafficking survivor and anti-trafficking activist these days. She's an excellent resource for these conversations, and I think her piece does a really good job breaking all of this down because it's kind of a complicated issue.